Brilliant. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here early. We all know that the real test of if you want to be somewhere is if you're there before 9 a.m. So you being here is telling me something. My name's Phoebe. I'm the product lead for the DeciderOS platform here at Decider Agentic Industries. I'm your host this morning, and I want to say up front, this isn't a product pitch. We built this event because the conversation we're about to have about skill atrophy and human judgment is one we have every single day. We wanted to have it with people who are navigating the same questions. None of this would be happening this morning without our amazing event sponsor, Marie Higgins. She's the founder of Innova, and I wanted to let her tell you a little bit about why you wanted to be part of the event today.
So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Marie Higgins, and I'm one of the three co-founders of Innova Search. We're a technology search firm, and we specialise in software products, data, and AI, placing execs, senior leaders, and their teams into private equity, asset estate, and high growth companies across Australia. About 3 years ago, I set up a Women in Tech meetup group in Sydney, because I saw the huge underrepresentation of women in tech. And I wanted to build a community where women could meet and support each other. And I'm very proud to say today we have over 1,200 people in the group. And we have events. We have regular events in Sydney, and we will be hosting our first Melbourne event with DS in October this year. Before I hand you back to Phoebe, I want to thank all the amazing women at Decider for helping organise today. Sarah, Carl, Phoebe, and obviously Andy for speaking. She only started on Monday, I think. And
I didn't know that.
And Danica as well. I know you're crazy. We're in New Zealand until a few hours ago. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you so much. All right, so why this conversation and why now? At Decider, we're building the DeciderOS, an operating system that helps businesses become what we call an AI organization, where agents are doing real autonomous work on behalf of the business. We've been shipping Agentic products for about a year now, and what I've learned sitting inside the product is that the technical questions are the easy ones, the hard ones are the human ones. Who's accountable when agents get it wrong? How do you keep people sharp when AI is doing more of the thinking? What happens to the early career professional who never gets a chance to build judgment through doing because the AI is already doing it for them? These are questions I live with every week. In the product decisions, the design calls, the customer conversations, this morning we have two people who have been living with those questions from very different vantage points. And I think that's going to make for a genuinely interesting conversation. Amazing. This morning, so our first speaker this morning is Andy Mastro-Savas. You have a background in human-computer interaction and technical ethics, meaning she's been thinking seriously about where technology and humans interact long before it became the thing that everyone was talking about. You've built operating models inside some of the world's largest organizations within Australia and the US, including Walmart's global innovation arm. You've also, full disclosure, just joined the Decider team, which I'm very excited about. And Andy thinks carefully about accountability, where human judgment actually lives inside an organization, and about the gap between responsible AI as a phrase and responsible AI as a practice. Andy, if you'd like to give her a warm welcome.
Hey everyone, can you hear me? Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not quite. Let's see how we go.
Hello.
I'll pass this to you otherwise. Switch.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. There we go.
Welcome everyone. I can see a couple of familiar faces. Hello. Nice to have you all here. Yes, a couple of things that are probably worth mentioning before I kick off is my academic background means that I care deeply about the human in the human-machine equation. And I tell you that not from a moral position, but because it's going to colour everything that I say hereafter, and it influences the way that I think about building products. And because it is day 4 of me at Decider, my opinions are my own for now.
Not for long.
Not for long. They will be codified, but not right now. And so when I thought about what I could add to this conversation that's not already sort of part of the discourse, sort of looked at what the common conversations were, out in the workforce. And I think a lot, understandably, are sort of defaulting to AI as a productivity tool and as sort of automation. And I think, that sort of reduces the actual consequence of the shift that's going to happen. It's not going to be at the task level. It's not going to be at the workflow. It's going to be at the organizational level. And I think that introduces some risks that aren't really part of the sort of the discourse at the moment that I want to talk about. It sort of behooves us to think about how we develop talent, how we govern decisions, and what that means for us as leaders and where we need to direct our attention. And the two sort of underappreciated risks, I think, are early career development and what are those implications for the pipeline for sort of management and leadership thereafter. And the other side of that coin, which is the other side of the human capability coin, is skill atrophy with increased automation. And so I think if you look at early career development, it started as the traditional knowledge worker. If you look at the career path traditionally, you entered the workforce after being a graduate and you were given sort of low complexity, low risk, sort of easy tasks. You did them badly, you got feedback, you did them better, you got given harder tasks, bigger tasks, more complex. You did them badly, you got feedback, you did them better. And you sort of went up this sort of ladder of learning. And that ladder led to you being able to supervise other people doing the same craft because you got so good at it. Well, Agentic AI is going to compress that career progression and it's going to subvert it. So a graduate might enter an organization, an agentic org, that their first task is to supervise an agent or multiple agents. They may never have developed the craft and they certainly haven't learned to supervise. And as leaders in the room, we know supervision does not come naturally. I was a terrible leader the first time I had to manage people. And over time I got better at it. But imagine that being your first task when you enter the workforce. And I'll talk a little bit more about, I think, how we can kind of address that. The other side of that, of the human capability coin, is skill atrophy. So think of your most tenured ICs, the people that are highly skilled at their craft, and a lot of those skills will not be used anymore. And so how do we sort of prevent, their skill atrophy? And one of those things I think we can look to, there are industries that have been increasing their sort of, autonomous systems over years, high risk, high precision industries like aviation and medicine, diagnostic medicine, robotics and industrial automation. And the pattern that they've seen time and time again as, more autonomy was brought into their, their workforce and their workflows was as automation increased, skills atrophied, situational awareness decreased, complacency increased, and judgment lapse. And of course, in those industries, they can't afford for that to happen because the moment that you need to intervene, the moment that you need the human, is the most high stakes consequential moment. And if your skills have atrophied, it's not a good outcome. So picture the flock of pigeons hitting the engine and you've got to land the plane on the Hudson River, and you better hope that you can still land that plane and that you haven't handed that task over to a machine for too long. So you've got humans that may never develop a craft. You've got other humans that craft skill is decreasing. And how do we address this as leaders and organizations? So I think there's a few things that leaders can do and organizations should be thinking about. One of them is rather than training tool use. So, typically we would hand, graduates and team members a bunch of tools, get them to learn the tools. This is not about learning tools. This is about training judgment. And I think we need to very intentionally build that capability, probably create some low stakes failure environments, allow team members to learn and fail and have the kind of simulations that these high risk industries do. What we've learned from, the aviation, diagnostic medicine, when we need a human to intervene at the edge case or the exception, often things like simulations and reskilling, rechecking skills, and preserving some manual operation routinely helps maintain those kind of skills. So training judgment, I think we have to protect development pathways. And this is going to get the most resistance because it's going to seem like inefficiency. It's going to seem like the antithesis of what we're trying to do with agentic AI. But I do think there's an argument for preserving some low complexity manual tasks for both your sort of graduates and tenured ICs, so that they maintain those skills. And what percentage that looks like, I think, is going to be different for every industry. But I do think we have a blueprint from the high risk, high precision, reliability industries that we can kind of look to for knowledge work. And then lastly, redesigning accountability. So today, everyone in your org might know that if you need to get some staplers, you go to Susan, and Susan approves that, and that's how you get your stapler. And that might have never been written down. It might not be codified that she's accountable for ordering the stapler. You all just know it, and that's going to need to change. Like, that is going to have to be codified. She's going to have to be explicitly accountable for that, and there's going to need to be an escalation pathway when that decision is wrong. And she orders 3,000 for a team of 10, right? So those accountability, the moment that a human needs to actually be accountable, we're going to have to, make very explicit and codify into the workflows.
Amazing.
Just to close out, I think I've got one more slide there. Yeah. If we look at, I'm just going to continue with the pilot metaphor because it's got some legs. I'm going to run with it. Over the last, early autopilot came in about 60 years ago, I think, and the sort of modern systems are about 40 years old. So this is a very long time frame of research and understanding of automation. But there's still a pilot. He comes over the speaker. We hear him when, him or her, when we get into the plane, they exist. And so they were not removed from the equation entirely. They were transformed. Their role was transformed. And even that moment when the pilot is landing the plane, it's not one or the other. It's not, is this the machine's job or is this the human's job? It's actually a coordination between the two. They're actually both landing the plane at the same time, just with different tasks. And so that coordination is where it's going to become really important. And I think if you look at the first industrial revolution, industrialized through steam and mechanical power, the second industrialized through electricity and assembly lines, and then AI is going to industrialize through coordination. So I think the emerging themes that I would sort of like to leave everyone to think about, and we can talk about, is thinking about AI not as a productivity tool and not as automation, but as coordination infrastructure. Human capability. So like I mentioned, skill preservation and, a craft skill as a first-class systems property. And we're probably going to need to define what does minimum viable craft look like in an agentic world. And then coordination design as a discipline. I think we're going to see a rise of coordination design, similar to interface design or service design, and folks with sort of really strong systems thinking backgrounds are going to be needed to sort of take that role. And then lastly, looking at organizations as hybrid cognitive systems. And I think, as I said, we can kind of look to these, the high-risk precision industries as a blueprint for how we do that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think something you said, or a takeaway, I feel like from what Andy's been mentioning this morning, is that AI doesn't actually just increase the supply of good judgment. It doesn't do that. It increases the supply of the execution layer. So the hybrid layer is so necessary between humans and agents. And I think that's exactly the thread I want to pick up with Danica, because Danica, you shared with me earlier as well about what happens when trust becomes a thing that can't be commoditized. So Danica, I just wanted to hand over to you in a second, but I'll introduce her to the room first. Here this morning is Danica Bell-Chambers, the Chief Data and Technology Officer at Dentsu, one of the world's largest creative and technology agent companies. Before that, she ran AI product strategy at Nine Entertainment, where she launched a 100-person generative AI championships program in partnership with Google. She's spoken at World Summit AI, sat on governance panels about agentic AI, and when she talks about AI culture and accountability, you're speaking from evidence, not just the commentary. So thank you, Danica. I'm going to hand over to you. Have you guys?
I do, yes.
Brilliant.
Hello.
Hello. Is it working?
I think it's working.
Great.
Good morning. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've been flying all over the world and been trying really hard to learn my script. I will not be as smooth as Andy, so I do have notes, so I apologize. But I thought rather than listen to me try to waffle through them, it's better that I get my message across, so forgive me. But thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I guess when I was asked to give a talk today, I really didn't know what to talk about. It was like, yeah, whatever you want, which was great. And I love the freedom, but I was like, whoa. Because I think as someone who is very passionate about responsible AI and governance, and I'm very aware that that makes me a very special kind of person, my mind went into overdrive and I really struggled to figure out what to say. But then a few weeks ago, I took myself over to London where I went to the AI Summit in London. And when I was there, something really shifted for me. So just on a side note, I make it a personal ambition to send myself to at least one global AI summit a year. For me, it's really about watching the narrative change. It's not so much about the product launches or what's happening. It's what people are talking about. What are they excited about? What are they anxious about? What are they avoiding? What is the conversations that are happening, not just on stage, but on the panels that are less scripted in the hallways? What is that conversation, that narrative that's happening? And what I noticed this year at the AI Summit in London is that narrative has changed quite significantly since last. At the World AI Summit in Amsterdam a few years ago and San Fran last year, it was very much dominated by capability. It was what can you do and how are you using it and how you're driving efficiencies and ability and the newest model and the newest frontier. And while that's exciting and it's great, I'll be honest, it gets a little exhausting after a while because there's only so much that you can do. But this year, the conversation moved not away from capability, but past it. And I think for me, that was a really interesting move because the question stopped being, what can AI do? And the question became, do we trust how it's being used? And so I think that shift really matters because it signals something important, which is that capability is no longer the differentiator that it once was for organizations. And I think that shift makes sense because I would say that what we're in right now is a trust recession. We are bombarded with deep fakes that are convincing enough to, impersonate executives. We are drowning in AI slop, content that is just generated at scale with no purpose, purely for volume rather than efficiency or effectiveness. We're watching organizations deploy AI as a cost out to replace our juniors. We're seeing through what Andy said, the impact that that's having. And they're not asking, can this model do the job? Is this the right thing to do? But they're just running at it. And I think because of that, the industry has given people a lot of reasons to distrust AI and to distrust the organizations that are using it. And so because of that, trust has eroded. And when something erodes, it becomes scarce. And as we know, when something becomes scarce, it becomes valuable. And so right now, trust is very, very valuable. And it's largely because there is so little of it to go around when it comes to AI and agentic AI. But importantly, trust doesn't generate itself. It's not a setting that you switch on. It's not something you can be like, okay, cool, we got trust now, go us. If you look closely at the recession that I just described to you, you can see that judgment is what's missing in that. The deep fakes, the slop, the head counts, those are the visible change, but underneath each one is the same root cause, which is that nobody made a judgment call before they ran it. Nobody asked, should we, before the deepfake technology was launched. Nobody made a call about what was actually worth publishing before the slop went out. And nobody asked what gets lost before we replace the people with a model. So yes, it is a trust recession, and that's really important. That's really key. But the trust is the symptom and judgment is the cause. And if we only treat the symptom, then I think we'll continue to keep having this conversation year after year at every summit, and it'll get deeper and deeper, and that trust recession will get worse. I think importantly, there was also a phrase, that got thrown around a lot at the summit, which I'm sure you all heard 100 times a day, which is that human in the loop. I hate that expression. I'm just going to put it out there. Hate it. Please, for the love of God, stop using it. Because it's become this very reflexive answer. Oh yeah, we've got human in the loop. Yeah, we've got governance. It's fine. A checkbox is not governance. A checkbox is presence without ownership. And so I think what we talked about, and one of the narratives that became really strong at the summit, was moving from human in the loop to human accountable for the loop. And it's really changing the way that we look at it. It's not, was someone there? It's, did someone check? Was someone accountable? Could someone explain the outcome? And if we think about some of the privacy laws that are changing at the end of the year when it comes to things like automated decision making, that type of accountability is no longer a nice to have. It's going to become imperative for your business. And so I think that is really the difference between an organization that's actually addressing the trust recession and one that's contributing to it. And so I think this is where it gets really interesting, is that capability used to be the advantage. It's commoditizing fast, and probably significantly faster than any of us expected 4 or 5 years ago when this really kind of took off. And I think the edge that you had, or the model that you had in January, is, it's infrastructure by June. It's just capability just isn't what people are after anymore. I think it's not the future trend. Excuse me. So capability stops being the differentiator. That's just the thing that's left. The thing that's left is trust, and trust only exists where judgment was actually executed, where it was executed visibly and consistently, and by someone who's willing to own the outcome. So that's not just a future trend to me. It's already showing up in the work. We get RFPs from our clients, and it's not a footnote anymore. It is, we want to know your responsible AI framework. We want to know, how do you treat governance? How do you treat accountability, transparency? Why should we trust you with our data and your applications? And so it's become a really clear thread in a lot of the work that we do with our clients. They're not just buying capability anymore, they're buying confidence. And they want to understand, and they want to make sure that someone exercised judgment before anything was shipped. And so it's why I think that the organizations that will win in the coming months and in the coming years aren't the ones with the best models. They're the ones who build trust in the beginning by design, not bolted on after, because I can tell you, retrofitting governance after the failure happens is the most expensive work an organization will ever do. So when I talk about trust as the new competitive advantage, I guess that's what I mean, is that capability is becoming table stakes. Judgment is what creates trust, and trust is the only thing left that can't be commoditized. So that's why human judgment in the age of AI, or in the age of agentic AI, is, not a break. It's not a break on what AI can do. It's the only thing that was ever going to make any of what we do trustworthy in the first place. That's it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Danica.
I should also say, as like Andy, those opinions are my own.
Yeah, you've only just recently started at Dentsu as well.
Yeah, back in May. So I've only been about 7 weeks.
Amazing. So we've got some fresh eyes coming into the conversation this morning. So now, as part of what we'll talk about is just doing a Q&A. We might throw to a room and see how you guys are going. I have a few prepared questions that we can jump into first. Because really today is about having that conversation and continuing this on and going back and forth. So let's have it all together. Andy, we'll probably talk to you first. Just joining Decider about 4 days ago, literally on Monday, running from running your own company to stepping into an agentic AI platform. What's the decision behind it?
Yeah, I mean, much like everyone in this room, I'm sure, like, I've seen a lot of technological change over the last few decades, but nothing as fast moving or as consequential as AI. And as much as I love working at the bleeding edge of emerging tech, and that I drive some of my decisions, I think the pattern that I've seen, like, repeatedly as every wave of technology, is that it takes some time for the unintended consequences to metabolize in society. We've seen, obviously tons of examples of, bias in algorithms and data. And if we look at social media, like, we knew for a long time that it was having negative impacts on our teenagers, but it took a couple of decades to actually get sort of federal regulated age restrictions. Meanwhile, an entire generation has, like, suffered the consequences of that. And I think AI is going to be more consequential. And so when I kind of look at where I want to work, I look at what Decider's doing at the orchestration layer. That's where the rules get set. That's where decisions get made. And that's where human values get encoded. And so I can critique that from the sidelines, or I can build an influence from within. So that was the decision that I made.
Yeah, amazing. I'm very glad for her joining the team, on the product team. Yay. Danica, I'll ask you as well. You've just stepped into your role at Dentsu, you said 7 weeks ago or so. At the same time, AI is absorbing more of the doing at the moment. What's actually changing about the job at the top? And what do you find yourself spending more time on now than you're probably spending time on beforehand?
Yeah, I think quite simply, the conversation for a data and tech team is very rarely data and tech these days. The tech is so commoditized. It's we'll build this, we'll we have this application, we'll nuance it for you, we'll make it bespoke. The tech is not really what takes up most of my time. A lot of my time and a lot of the conversations I have now are governance. It's about how do we ensure, especially as a global agency, how do we ensure that what we're building is not only efficient and effective now, but resilient for future regulatory change, for the changing global AI standards, but also built in a way that should our Japan team want to take it and ship it for one of their clients, can we do that? What are the legislation and what are the requirements that we need to understand? So my job is actually quite a lot less about the technology and building the technology and the data. I have a wonderful, very strong team that does that brilliantly. My role is very much understanding how do we do it right and respectfully and within the guidelines of our regulation and our ethics.
Something to follow up on that is we've been hearing a lot lately, I'm not sure if you heard it when you were at the recent AI summit, is sovereignty. With sovereign AI, to do with governance, is a similar vein, but sovereignty meaning being able to look at things in their government regulatory and legal frameworks. So being able to go, okay, data has to be structured this way in Australia, this way in the US, this way in the UK. Has sovereignty been one of the words that's been popping up at the top as well lately, or how is that looking?
There's definitely a lot of conversation around it. So the summit was definitely also very focused on sovereignty. So I think my role being Australia and New Zealand, I'm lucky in that they have similar principles and they have similar guidelines and regulation, but there are nuances that need to be accounted for. Something that we can do in Australia, we can't do in New Zealand and vice versa. And I think we still, obviously, as a small country, leverage a lot of global models and global capabilities. And so not being able to have our models, capabilities, and data within our regulatory framework is obviously something that we need to be mindful of as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'll throw to Andy. You've rebuilt operating models from scratch multiple times inside Walmart, agri-tech, and in cultural tourism. When you're designing a team for an agentic AI world, and I'll know because I'm definitely going to be part of that, what is the first thing you'd change about how most organizations are structured?
Yeah, as you and Maddie and the rest of the product team are starting to discover, like, I'm pretty bullish on developing talent and creating development pathways. Like I said, I think it's going to have to be a lot more intentional because it is going to be easier to avoid. But I think the first thing I would look at is the type of talent. And I'll give you an example from Walmart. When I was there, we were the spatial computing arm, so we were designing VR and AR. And one of my observations at the time was that a lot of the times when you went into a VR experience, something felt off, like it just didn't feel quite right. And so rather than hiring sort of standard kind of game designers and UX designers that everyone was doing at the time, I brought in architects. And that was a big sell, to bring in architects to the product team. But they architected the world, they architected the environments, and that made them sound and it made them feel right. And so I look at sort of the type of talent and skills and thinking that might not be traditional. And again, this coordination design I think is going to be critical. And so I will be looking, like, if I'm hiring anybody, I'm going to be looking for skills like systems thinking, and that could be folks from industrial engineering, mechanical engineering, systems engineering backgrounds, HCI, even things like service design, customer experience design, people that can think in systems and not in isolation. That's going to be critical. So I'll look at the types of skills and then how we develop talent.
Yeah, amazing. I think that skill is going to definitely be building trust as well. If people know how the infrastructure layer is built and how things are actually pushing from one thing to another, then you might actually be able to build trust with your clients again, rather than just giving them the outcome and the demo looks great because Claude Design or Claude Codes put it together for you. So definitely. Andy, you've written something most people don't say out loud, that leadership fatigue might actually be driving some of the AI adoption. Leaders finding it easier to work with machines than develop humans. Do you think that's real? What's the cost of it?
I did say that out loud on a LinkedIn post, so I should probably defend it. Yeah, look, I do think there is a real and unspoken leadership fatigue. And I think a lot of it is an artifact of the pandemic. And full disclosure, I was in the US at the time and I was in LA in the epicenter. So my experience of the pandemic might be slightly skewed. But for those of us that were leading at the time, particularly into the startups where the average age of the team member tends to skew younger, I'm not sure about everyone else, but I found myself managing a team that this was their first global crisis. They didn't do the dot-com crash. They didn't go through September 11. They weren't impacted by the 2008 financial crisis. This was literally their first crisis, and it was on our watch as leaders and as managers. I think I can say this to this audience. I think there was a gender asymmetry in the emotional load that leaders and people at home and in the workplace. And I do think that drove a fair amount of fatigue. Out of the ashes of that came AI that, could take instruction very well. And if you have all of the business context and you've got the high craft skill and you understand industry pattern recognition, it's very seductive to prompt a machine that doesn't fatigue, that doesn't need to be reminded, and it doesn't bring a heavy emotional conversation on a Friday afternoon. And so I don't think we're talking about it or being honest about it, but I think there is a seduction in sort of avoiding developing people, managing people that some leaders are, considering with AI, it sort of takes me back to why we're going to have to be intentional about career development, because if it's tempting to avoid managing people and developing people, what does that mean for our pipelines? Because I mean, we all want to retire and have succession plans, right? And if there's no one to take our spot, what are we going to do?
Oh no. Even just the recommendation that to give AI a more aggressive prompt. I think this went around about 6 months to a year ago. The more aggressive you are with the actual AI in your prompt, the better results you were getting. And then it's teaching leaders to be, well, maybe that's actually how I can get better results. So there's so many different layers to the personality of the AI that you're dealing with as well, and the personality of your team. So that's definitely going to be something we're all thinking about. Danica, moving from chatting about our leadership to the future generation as well of who the leaders are going to be, exactly what Andy was just mentioning. You mentor through a sisterhood. When you think about the next wave of these leaders, what's the judgment you most want to help them develop? And can it be taught? Does it have to be lived? What are you thinking?
Oh, I think there's so much judgment. Where do you start? I would say skepticism, a very healthy level of skepticism. I think the younger generation is, oh, but the AI told me. Oh, but it came out of Claude. I literally had a slide in a deck the other day that I was like, what is this saying? Can you explain it to me? They're like, I don't know, it came out of Claude. And I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So I think it's that healthy level of skepticism to be like, okay, cool, use it. It's efficient and it's helping you. But understand it. Is it accurate? Does it make sense? Do your research, question it, use it to make yourself more efficient, but don't use it to replace your own human cognition, because all you're doing is a disservice to your own learning and your own intelligence. So I think I mentor through a sisterhood because I think it's both. You need lived experiences. And I think a lot of learning and a lot of judgment comes from lived experiences. You don't know how to deal with a global pandemic as a leader if you've never had to do that before, right? But it's not feasible for every person to have every experience to enable that kind of judgment building. And so through mentorship, what we're able to do is share our lived experiences with our mentees in a way that gives them a different perspective of, you might not have experienced it, but I did. Here's how I experienced. Ask me questions. What do you want to know? And how can I help you develop the judgment that you would have developed had you been there? And so it's really about lived experience or providing an alternative version of a lived experience for them.
Yeah, amazing. I know that I benefit from that when looking up and having conversations with my leaders as well, like hearing and watching and being involved in their experiences, even if I'm not the one actually doing it, is always the best way to learn, is from somebody else doing it alongside you. So you spoke about, when you were mentioning before, trust as the new competitive advantage. So maybe for somebody that you're mentoring, actually being able to say what this slide means builds trust with leaders. And AI makes that capability abundant, but trust is not. So where did that thinking kind of come from?
I think it's been a narrative that's been kind of building for a while, but the summit a few weeks ago really kind of nailed it. And I just remember thinking it's not revolutionary, but it's quite it was interesting to me how many times it came up. It would be a topic that had absolutely nothing to do with governance, yet trust was mentioned. It was about, let's go and build an agent live on stage in front of everyone. Trust was mentioned. And it was this undertone that kind of fed through the whole summit. And so when I came back from the summit, I did a lot of research in understanding, there's been a huge uplift in academic papers on trust in AI. There's been a lot more panel talks about trust in AI. And it's just a lot of research that I did showed that this is really actually becoming a topic that, needs to be addressed and talked about. But I think what I found really interesting is that since I started at Dentsu, over the 7 weeks and all the RFPs that have come in, every single one of them has, what is your responsible AI governance process framework? How do we trust you? Why do we trust you? And it's not a footnote anymore. It's not a compliance thing for the legal team to be like, oh, procurement did their job. It is front and center. It's taking, a quarter of the pitch to talk through our responsible AI practices because it's important to clients now. And so I think that all together was like, this is why it really needs to be thought about differently, and it becomes that new competitive advantage.
Definitely. What we might do now is throw to the room if you have a few questions. We'd love to hear from you. I'll start over here, and then I'll repeat your question if you like.
Yep. So, Andy, you were mentioning earlier about redesigning accountability. I thought that was a really interesting book because I've like helped agents with that. And you mentioned like being explicit and then codifying into workflows. Could you expand on that a little? Because I feel like that's the $1 million question in many of our minds. Like, how do we make this happen?
Yeah, look, I think there's some easy kind of initial approaches of kind of mapping, I guess, like mapping the judgment that goes on in your organization, right? So taking all of that, what's in people's heads of who do I go to for that approval, and there's an exercise that can be done to actually extract all of that tacit knowledge from your organization. And I think that's kind of the starting point. And there's a bit of sort of business analysis kind of, that needs to happen, like process flows that may never have been mapped. But they're actually judgment flows. They're actually flows of decisions. And depending on the size of your organization, that's going to look, at one type of scale or another. But I think that's a good starting point, is to kind of map all of those flows that are implicit to, today, that you need to make explicit. And then it's a matter of kind of pulling out, well, where is the moment that a human actually needs to make a decision, make that explicit. Then it's like, well, who is the human? Like, who are we making accountable for that? And what's their escalation pathway? What's their override ability? Because when something goes wrong at 2 a.m., like someone is going to need to be accountable for that. And today, those things, people sort of just understand or know, they know who to talk to, or they talk to one person, they say, we'll go talk to this person. But that is codified. It's just not written down and in an agentic flow today, but it might be in the future.
And so where you've got agents in the mix there, then you make people accountable for those agents. So if something is going off the rails, then you know where in the flow who owns that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that poor Andy being here 4 days, we are building the Decider OS platform as well. There is the agentic flow. It can be like building a slide. You can build a slide, but the human needs to know the content within it is something that they can stand behind. So it's deciding exactly what Andy's saying. We have a company within the Decider Agentic Industries group, Sugarwork, who are deliberately going into enterprise organizations and mapping their tacit knowledge, interviewing people over and over again to find out what is the thing that's being done, what is the decision that's being made, and deciding which parts of those to agentify. So yes, you build an agent to do a task, but you always, excuse my expression, the human in the loop, you definitely have to have somebody that's able to say the goal of what I'm wanting to do. The agent can help you achieve that goal, but the measurement of it right now, we don't have a measurement mechanism in the industry. We just have, you've asked for something, provide an answer. You've built an agent to do something. Is the agent doing what you're wanting it to do? So I think that what we're missing right now, and where the human task comes into it, is the measurement of success. Is it successful? Is it not? The quality of the decision that's being made. Decider.
I was just going to add to that your comment you made around kind of owning the agent and being accountable for the agent. One of the things that we looked at 9 was agents need to be treated like employees. So just like you would do performance reviews for your employees, you do a performance review for your agent. So what is that criteria? When are we ready for that agent to take on more personal information or take on more accountability? It's because they've met these standards and these frameworks. So for us, it was very much an agent is just an agentic human. It requires the same supervision, the same learning and guidance and support to get to where it needs to go. And somebody needs to be accountable for ensuring that it does that.
And I think that probably brings into the equation what we were talking about before with Andy, the volume of managers now is going to be everyone's a manager of multiple agents, even our juniors. And so you've got to make sure that those goals are communicated at the lowest possible level to make sure that everyone actually understands why we're doing what we're doing. And the product sense, definitely. We've had a few other questions from the floor. I'll throw to yourself.
Just quickly, so I think we're sort of talking about, you guys talking about when organisations are already in this phase. We're talking about the human aspect and making sure people are accountable, those sort of things. What's your thought on moving that even earlier into education? So like younger kids that are in 7 or whatever it is, but then you're looking at university. I've written a couple of posts about, well, we should be going back into the future because TDD, how you're developing, all those skills have got new words, but they're still relevant for today in building AI products.
I'm really glad you asked that question. I've been thinking about this a lot, and actually I got a survey from my university in the US. They sent it out to all the alums to actually kind of understand this a little bit better, like what skills should we be teaching. And it was actually shocking when I did the survey, because they asked, to rate some of the current skills, and some of them are so obsolete that, like, of course they should be removed from curriculum immediately, but just the pace at which that's changing, education itself is going to need to agentify to keep up. But we absolutely have to go upstream into education at the high school level. Like, you think about, when I was in high school, like, photography was not a class you could take, right? And so, curriculums are going to need to change and quickly. And it's that, rather than it being task-based or this is the skill I'm going to learn, it's more like, I'm not going to learn, how to focus a camera. I'm going to learn to, is that output quality, back to your point about identifying the goal and the outcome. And that is not the way that we educate today. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in education. I've been thinking about this a lot.
Definitely. There was one at the back.
So I've got 2 questions. One is based on the agentic AI discussion that we're having. How important do you think is it to actually have core, not human in the loop, but core sort of going back to the human confirmed? So rather than giving 100% autonomy to an agent, the agent needs to actually go back to the human, confirm what it's doing. Because we've actually done that in our agentic AI development. That actually works really well. Agents can simply send SMSs, things, whatever, right? And then they can actually check if I'm on the right track, if I'm not. And you build that inside the agent and you make sure that that can be responsibility, that can record the correction, that could be, direction correction, however you want. So that's just one question. Do you think that actually impedes the autonomy?
So quite simply, what I would say is it needs to be risk-based. So what is your agent doing? And if you let it go autonomously and it does something wrong, what's going to happen? Is it going to, drain the money out of someone's bank account and send them bankrupt? Is it going to send an SMS that spells their name incorrectly? And so the level of... Exactly. So it needs to be based on the level of risk, because if what you do is you put humans in, I hate the expression, humans in the loop.
You said
it comes out. It comes out. Human in the process. If you put a checkpoint. Yeah.
Basically, simply pinging back
Mhm.
and saying, am I on the right track?
Yeah, if you put a human in that process every single time and check it, confirm, then you'll end up with organizations who, and this happened, I forget who it was, they wanted to put AI into their audit process. And they put it in, but then they're like, oh, but a human needs to check that, and a human needs to check that, a human needs to check that. And what they did was they doubled the time that it took for their audit process to happen. They lost money, they had to hire more people, and they had to kind of take the AI out of it. So you need to make it risk-based. What's the worst that's going to happen? That should determine the level of risk, the level of oversight. And then there's obviously a point where you get to where you go, that absolutely should not touch agentic AI ever. And that should be a hard no.
Yeah. Task-based.
It's actually sort of a statement based on that discussion that we just had. I've actually managed the Tibet sector for a very, very large Tibet sector. And one of the focuses that I think Australia, and this was actually outside of Australia. So one of the focuses that Australia should be looking at doing is actually merging Tibet into the current classroom, right? So today, I don't think it's the discussion in the next 1 year is not going to be about which university you graduate from. So today, if I want to hire a trust developer, I'd rather hire one who's actually done 15 years of coding rather than 15 years of education. So it's all going to be about skills. So I think we should get as much of the skills into the education as possible.
Yeah, well, and the right kind of skill. I'll just keep banging on about systems thinking, but I think, people that can sort of create the conditions for good human judgment and AI coordination to kind of exist, and like that's something that's going to need to be taught, and it's a new skill, and we need to develop curriculums for it, and whether that's learnt on the job, or whether that's learnt in an education environment, or whether that's learnt like through an agentic education environment, like I think is irrelevant. But yeah, I think those skills, and really identifying which ones of those skills are going to be important, that are going to that aren't going to date as quickly as what some of them have, like prompt engineering.
Amazing. We have time for probably one more question. So I'll start down here just because this is the first one that popped up.
Danica, I love the point that you made earlier around trust being the new competitive advantage. What do you see, or what do you think will be the biggest signals of trust that organizations will start to present in the future, and that we as a kind of consumers and users will start to rely on?
I think a big one's just going to come down to explainability. I think we've worked in a black box environment for so long that we're implementing and we're like, look, we've got this cool machine. Everybody wants to know, how does it work? If you can't stand up in front of your client and go, this is exactly how it works, this is how it got to this decision, and this is why it did this, then you're not going to get the trust. People want to understand why it's making the decisions that it's making. And like I said before, with the ADM changes that are coming in the privacy laws in Australia in December, it's clear that people are thinking that way. Black boxes are not going to fly anymore. Vaporware and sparkly demos are not going to make the cut anymore. People need to see what it does, understand it, and it needs to be explainable. And that's going to be a big leverage of your trust.
I think that's a great way to end this morning's discussion. I'll just take maybe about 30 seconds to be transparent about where I'm sitting in this room. So I'm the product lead for the Decider OS platform, which means I'm the person who decides every sprint what our platform does and doesn't automate. What stays human, what gets handed to an agent. And I have to deal with that myself too. What do I hand to an agent? What do I still do? I don't get to sit outside the question. It's my job description. So let me tell you what we're actually building, because I think it's relevant to what we've just talked about. Decider is an AI transformation business, which in practice, that means we take the business and how it actually runs now, the tacit knowledge, the workflows, the decisions nobody talks about, and we make them executable, auditable, and repeatable within the Decider OS. The product works in 3 layers. The first is what the industry are calling the AI brain, or the knowledge center, a single structured version of your business reality, because without it, you don't know where you are. Your customers, your deals, your data, across every tool you're running. It's an aggregated record of what's actually true right now. What has been true in the past, while predicting what might be true in the future. Past, present, and future business state. Most businesses don't lack the information, they lack one singular version of it, which we all see daily when we read documents and from different people having different lenses. But the second layer is goals. The system where it knows where you are, but it also asks where you're going. DeciderOS infers your targets from your business context, revenue you want to hit, conversion rates you want to move, and pipeline that you want to build, and tracks them in real time against what's actually happening. So it's a live loop between your ambition and the reality of your business. So the business always knows whether it's closing the gap or drifting from it. The third layer is execution, agents and applications that close the gap between where you are and where you want to be, orchestrated by your team toward your actual goals with accuracy and auditability built in. The current issue with AI implementation, I think that we've been speaking about this morning, is that it's costing a lot of money to move fast, but no one really understands how that translates to outcomes. The DeciderOS apps and agents are built with direct performance lines, and an app won't keep getting used if it's underperforming for them. What we're trying to do with all of that, and I think that we've touched on it this morning with Andy and Danica, is protect human judgment, not replace it. Because here's the thing about a deterministic and auditable system, it doesn't hide that decision. It makes visible what was previously and currently in the industry invisible. The logic, the assumption, the call made on a Friday that became policy. When that's legible, humans can interrogate and challenge it and own it. Andy named something important about skill atrophy as well, that every workflow we automate removes a repetition from someone who used to get to learn that by trial and error. I think that's I think about that as a product decision with huge cultural consequence. And the way we try and hold it is we automate that retrieval, the routing, the execution of those slides, but we keep the decision and the ownership of the goal in the room, make the judgment more visible, not less. Because in an AI-first world, the work that matters becomes more human, not less. The judgment, the culture, the accountability, that trust, those don't get automated. They become more visible because the machine makes everything else faster. And what remains is the quality of the decisions by the goals that have been set for them. That's what we're building. If you'd like to have a conversation about that and continue it as well, we have a boardroom lunch on the 9th of July. It's a smaller group, it's in this office, it's focused on demonstration, the kind of conversation where we can actually get into it and you can find out more. Details are on our website, or you can come find someone from our team later and talk to us about it. I'd love to see you all there. But thank you all for coming. Thank you to our amazing speakers this morning. Please stick around. We're going to have coffee and there's plenty of food up here that you can come grab and ask us any questions. Thanks for coming, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.